Eight more people arrested by the ICAC in connection with the airport's third runway project. The White House says 3 unidentified aerial objects shot down in the past week were not a threat to security. And former South Carolina governor and U.S. ambassador to the UN, Nikki Haley, enters the presidential race. Hello and welcome to TVB News. 8 more people have been charged by the ICAC for suspected bribery in connection with the construction of the airport's third runway. The project involved contracts and orders worth $200 million. The anti-corruption agency says, as of now, it believes a culture of corruption does not exist in the airport authority. As Timothy Lee reports, the ICAC is questioning the behavior of the individuals involved instead of the system itself.
Last August, the Independent Commission Against Corruption revealed a major corruption scandal revolving around the airport's third runway project. At the time, the ICAC arrested 32 individuals, including 4 airport authority staff members, on suspicion of corruption. In the span of around half a year, the anti-corruption body has pressed charges against 8 more individuals. Among the 8 newly charged are former general manager of the airport authority, Yin Kekyong, and 2 construction contractors for the third runway, involving 15 counts of corruption and money laundering. Former airport authority principal manager Ricky Lee, who was charged earlier, now faces an additional charge of money laundering. His wife, suspected of managing the laundered funds with an estimated worth of $6 million, is also facing the same charge. The ICAC found during its investigation that Yin Kekyong and Ricky Lee were suspected to have received $4.3 million in bribes between January 2017 and August last year. A reclamation sand contractor was suspected to have bribed Lee with $800,000 in exchange for an order for materials worth $140 million. Meanwhile, 2 steelworks and filling materials subcontractors were suspected to have separately bribed the 2 airport authority staff members with $1 million and $2.5 million in exchange for contracts worth $37 million and $28 million, respectively. Still, the ICAC said a culture of corruption does not exist in the airport authority at the moment. The corruption case was simply related to dubious individuals rather than the procedure.
After our case turned over, we have been maintaining close liaison with the airport authority on how to improve the procedures, and our corruption prevention departments have given a list of proposals on how to improve the tendering and other works procedures.
The anti-corruption agency said its investigation is ongoing and did not rule out the possibility of more arrests. Timothy Lee, TVB News.
Deputy Secretary for Justice Horace Chung said the government is working on legislation for Article 23 of the Basic Law and has not met any difficulties in the process. Chung was speaking to reporters after a meeting today involving senior government officials and lawmakers in the antechamber of the Legislative Council. He said authorities are working at full speed on Article 23 legislation in accordance with the instruction of Chief Executive John Lee, and he hopes there will be concrete progress within this year. On some 6,000 people arrested during the 2019 social unrest who have not yet been prosecuted, Chung said he did not see any delay in the handling of the cases. There have been suggestions that some of the cases may be dropped. Chung said decisions will be announced at an appropriate time. One day after iCable announced that it will close down its pay TV service on June 1st, it is still unclear whether there will be layoff of staff. According to iCable, there are no plans to lay off staff for now, but LegCo documents show the Communication Authority understands that there would be layoffs after the termination of the company's pay TV service. The authority said cable TV's market share had been declining in recent years, and its withdrawal from the market would not affect the overall broadcasting landscape too much. Cable TV said its number of subscribers had fallen to 680,000 from 1 million. In the U.S., the White House says the 3 unidentified aerial objects shot down in the past week over American and Canadian airspace were not a threat to security. Forensic experts, meanwhile, are examining equipment found in the Chinese balloon that was shot down on February 4th. Nasvi Karim reports.
Balloons over the United States are now split into 2 narratives. One concerns what the U.S. says is a Chinese spy balloon. The other relates to 3 benign objects recently shot out of the North American sky at a cost of $2.5 million US. The first storyline is deepening a diplomatic rift between the US and China, which says the civilian airship was for research, with Beijing accusing the US of also sending balloons into Chinese airspace during 2022. The second raises questions as to why US President Joe Biden even bothered, with the military saying they fired 4 missiles at the objects, one of them missing.
But isn't it embarrassed by that? The idea that you would take hundreds of thousands of dollars of equipment?
Michael, let me answer the question. I don't think the president should be embarrassed, right, by the fact that he took action to make sure that our airspace, civilian airspace, was safe. I don't think that he should.
In Washington, lawmakers were largely agreeable that the 3 unidentified objects did not pose a threat. Florida's Republican Senator Marco Rubio even backed the government's decision to shoot them down.
They shot it down because they felt it was operating at an altitude that posed a threat to commercial aviation. If we have things flying over our airspace that is not ours, do not coordinate with us and doesn't belong there, that is the definition of danger.
The Chinese balloon is a different monster for Biden, who was criticized for waiting until it crossed the continent before shooting it down off South Carolina. Its incursion into U.S. airspace prompted Secretary of State Antony Blinken to pull out of a trip to Beijing aimed at easing tensions between the 2 countries. Washington has rejected Beijing's claim that the U.S. sent more than 10 balloons into Chinese airspace last year. The U.S. military said on Monday it had recovered critical electronics from the Chinese balloon, and experts are trying to identify where the components came from and if laws were broken in supplying high-tech equipment to China. Nasvi Karim, TVB News.
Also in the U.S., former governor of South Carolina and U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, Nikki Haley, has kicked off her campaign for the 2024 Republican presidential nomination. She's challenging her former boss, Donald Trump, for the top job.
Some people look at America and see vulnerability. The socialist left sees an opportunity to rewrite history. China and Russia are on the march. They all think we can be bullied, kicked around. You should know this about me. I don't put up with bullies. And when you kick back, it hurts them more if you're wearing heels. I'm Nikki Haley, and I'm running for president.
Launching her candidacy more than 20 months ahead of the November 2024 election gives Haley an advantage to draw attention before the Republican field grows in the next weeks and months. A poll puts the support for Haley at 4% of registered Republican voters, far behind Trump at 43%. Turkish President Tayyip Erdogan has vowed to press on with rescue and recovery efforts more than a week after a powerful quake ripped through his country and neighboring Syria. The combined death toll so far has exceeded 41,000, with many survivors enduring homelessness in near-freezing weather conditions. Tracy Furness has more.
More people are being found alive under the rubble of collapsed buildings more than 200 hours after the earthquake struck. A man and a woman were rescued from the rubble in the Turkish city of Hatay Tuesday, 8 days after the devastating quake. And a 77-year-old man was found alive in Adiyaman 212 hours after being trapped under the rubble. International rescue crews are continuing to search for survivors in both Turkey and Syria. We arrived in Hatay Saturday, and since then we have not stopped seeing how there are people who are being rescued alive every day. We think there is still a chance there are people below the rubble, and we should keep looking, said this man from the fire department Canine unit in Sevilla, Spain. Meanwhile, a makeshift hospital has been set up on a warship to get medical help to residents in Iskenderun and its surrounding area. The ship is housing doctors' surgeries and diagnostic rooms, paediatricians, surgeons, orthopedists and X-ray facilities, among others, as well as 300 beds. Turkish President Tayyip Erdogan gave a speech in the capital Ankara saying hundreds of thousands of buildings were uninhabitable across southern Turkey, adding he will enforce stricter building regulations. The fact that 98% of the buildings that have collapsed in the latest disaster are the ones that were built before 1999 shows us the progress we made in the standardization of buildings and inspections, but it reminds us that we need to be stricter, he said. This as the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres launched a $397 million appeal to help millions of survivors of the quake in rebel-held northwest Syria.
This will cover a period of 3 months. We are in the final stages of a similar appeal for Turkey.
Guterres said the appeal will provide desperately needed life-saving relief for nearly 5 million Syrians, including shelter, healthcare, food and protection. Tracy Furness, TVB News.
Meantime, Russia says its troops have broken through Ukrainian lines in the Luhansk region as Moscow steps up military efforts in the eastern regions. The Russian Defense Ministry said Ukrainian troops retreated up to 3 kilometers from previous positions, adding that 2 lines of defenses were broken. Ukrainian forces say they have repelled numerous assaults in the adjacent Donetsk region. Amid the offensive, Ukrainian Red Cross volunteers continue to evacuate immobile patients from Donetsk hospitals. They are being taken to a Doctors Without Borders medical train heading towards safer regions of Ukraine. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, meanwhile, hailed Tuesday's 9th round of Ramstein talks, saying partners will send air defense systems, more tanks, as well as artillery and shells. As NATO defense ministers met in Brussels, they reiterated their support for Ukraine, but stopped short of offering promises on fighter jets. Still ahead, Consumer Council tests find pesticide in over 40% of samples of pre-packaged edible fungi. BBC offices in India raided by tax inspectors. And a New Zealand pilot held hostage by a separatist group in Indonesia's Papua region. Welcome back. The British Broadcasting Corporation says it is cooperating with the Indian authorities as its offices in Mumbai and New Delhi are raided by tax inspectors. Opposition leaders in India claim the financial investigation is politically motivated after the broadcaster tried to air a program which was critical of Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi. The audit has been going on at the building containing the BBC for 2 days, but no further details have been released. The recent documentary focused on Modi's role in riots when he was Chief Minister of Gujarat State in 2002. The story was banned from broadcast and branded as propaganda by the government. A spokesman for Modi described the BBC as an organization that spews venom. Separatists in Indonesia's Papua region have released photos they say are New Zealand hostage Philip Mertens. The pilot was abducted last week. The West Papua National Liberation Army claim the captain is in good health, but announced he won't be freed until authorities acknowledge the independence of the area. In a statement accompanying the images, the group described Mertens as collateral in a political dispute. Indonesia has vowed to ensure his release, but their security minister said it will be done in a persuasive approach because safety is the priority. Former lawmaker Au Nok Hin continued to testify as a prosecuting witness for Hong Kong's largest national security trial.
Among the 47 Democrats and activists involved in the trial, 16 have pleaded not guilty to subversion charges. For the third day, defendant Au Nak Hin took the stand as an accomplice witness for the prosecution. Today, the prosecution questioned Au for details of coordination meetings held for the elections of different geographical constituencies. For the Kowloon East constituency, Au said he doesn't remember all contents in his meeting documents sent to the WhatsApp group, but he could affirm there was the phrase proactively using powers granted by the Basic Law to veto the government's budget. But after the judge said no relevant documents had been submitted to the court, Au explained he had a habit of deleting files, but he did see and receive such documents. For the Hong Kong Island constituency, Au said District Councillor Paul Zimmerman at the coordination meeting in March 2020 opposed former law professor Benny Tai's idea of proactively using powers granted by the Basic Law. At the time, Tai explained proactive means they have a choice on whether to exercise such powers.
The prosecution questioned Au Nak Hin multiple times whether he could confirm if the meeting's minutes contained the idea of proactively using powers granted by the Basic Law to veto the government's budget. The defendant's lawyer, Trevor Beale, objected to the interrogation, saying that's a leading question and the prosecution should ask open-ended ones instead. Agreeing with that, the judge reminded the prosecution to mind his choice of words.
On to the two meetings involving the Kowloon West constituency. Au said Tai mentioned plans to veto government bills. Jimmy Sham of the League of Social Democrats questioned the idea, saying they ought to support bills for social welfare, such as the Universal Retirement Scheme. Au himself also told Tai that Tai's article, which pointed to the mutual destruction with the government, was too crazy. For the two Kowloon East meetings, Au said the semantics on the use of proactively has sparked heated debates among attendees. Jackie Lin, TVB News.
The Agriculture, Fisheries and Conservation Department confirmed a shop in Yau Ma Tei sold cat meat as food, and it will be prosecuted. This is the shop involved in the case. The establishment has now been closed for at least 2 days. Authorities say they received 3 tip-offs related to the alleged sale or possession of cat or dog meat over the past 5 years. The last case involving the consumption of dog meat was fined $500. Lawmaker Reverend Peter Kuhn said the current penalties are not enough of a deterrent. As a member of the Chinese People's Political Consultative Conference, he said he will propose banning the consumption of cat, dog, and game meat on the mainland. Under Hong Kong law, those eating, selling, or possessing cat or dog meat for food could face a maximum penalty of 6 months in jail and a fine of $5,000. The Consumer Council tested 28 samples of prepackaged edible fungi on the market, such as black fungus and snow fungus. While all samples were confirmed rich in nutrients, over 40% were discovered to have at least one type of pesticide. The council also conducted trials on 14 dehumidifiers. 2 models were found to underperform. Memo Sangai has more.
These are the 28 dried edible fungi samples that the Consumer Council tested on the market, including black fungus, whiteback black fungus, and snow fungus. The council said all fungi samples were discovered to be rich in nutrients, for instance, with black fungus containing the highest average iron content, which is an essential element in producing hemoglobin and preventing anemia. But the council said 12 samples contained at least one pesticide residue, adding that one organic sample had 4 types of pesticide residues. While the consumer watchdog says such residues are unlikely to cause major health risks, it advised consumers to watch the fungi carefully before eating. Meanwhile, consumers should avoid soaking fungi at room temperature for over 2 hours to prevent the production of toxic bronchitic acid, as it could lead to deranged liver function and liver death. The Consumer Council also tested 14 dehumidifiers with prices ranging from $2,099 to $6,180. 2 models produced by Whirlpool and Sanusi were found less capable of withdrawing moisture after installing air filters. Under the standard test environment, the Whirlpool model can remove 14 liters of water, 13.2% less than its claim. The performance of Sanusi is worse. Only 11 liters of water can be withdrawn. Under the standard test environment, 23% less than the manufacturer's claim. Not only that, both dehumidifiers only reach grade 1 energy efficiency when operating without an air filter.
If you know the theory of the dehumidification, they actually take in the humid air and then let the water dripping down and then with the dry air coming out. So if the heavy rain will affect the ventilation of the air, and that will affect the efficiency.
The Consumer Council reminds residents that they should not leave dehumidifiers operating unattended while they are asleep, otherwise it could cause safety hazards. Mimosa 9, TVB News.
That's the news. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.